I mean, it seems like we've had it for a while. Yeah, you're right.
I didn't see your name.
Yeah, we can, shoot out an email to see if anyone wants to. We could actually probably,
Floating around.
kind of doing that the elementary level next year. Yeah, the other thing we have to look at for next year is looking at installing so that's something we're going to look at. There's a big shift from what we have to do. I mean, the concept's the same.
Welcome, everyone. Let's get started.
Can we scroll that agenda up, please? Thank you.
Okay. First thing we have on the agenda today is to request approval of a middle school course for grade 8 first aid and athletic training.
So Mr. McCumsey is not here, and I know Mr. Ross and Dr. Indeglio, if there is anything in addition to what we shared at the board meeting, at curriculum council meeting last month that we would like to add. The descriptor is in the scrolling agenda. We remember that the students would have taken 7th grade health, be currently enrolled in 8th grade health. And this is, as the principals have just given the charge to the encores to really offer some uniquely interesting courses in their particular disciplines, and this was health and PE's response to that challenge.
Are there any questions or comments before we?
Do we know what the cost of additional curriculum items will be, and is that in next year's budget then?
So yes, that would be in the 16-17 budget, Mrs. Bertoni. So we have a document that has the various materials, and Mr. McCumsey gave me a breakdown of an estimated cost at $11,300. So
Building or total?
total. That's dependent, however, on enrollment. So we may want to go with a not to exceed cost if we need additional materials.
Is that one time only?
Well, some of these could be every year, like disposable face shields, fillers and lung packages that children would use personally would need to be replaced. But some things like mannequins, training, unless we had new staff, that would be a one-time cost.
We have one more question too. I think at the end of it said that there was a cost to the student for the CPR certification. Do you know what that is?
I think it's 30. Got it.
Can you scroll
I
down to
believe
that?
it's $35.
Kim, please.
So a student could take the course and not get the certification also?
They could.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't want to pay $35.
The certification.
Thank you.
They can take the course, but the certification will be in addition.
Anybody else? You okay to move this forward? Yep. Thank you. Moving on, we request approval of the 2016-17 middle school academic handbook.
Thank you, Mrs. Simonelli. I know the principals probably have other things they might want to point out, but I would like to point out on pages 18 and 19, and Stacy Van Zandt will talk to this document, but Stacy, who was the World Language Curriculum Leader, spent considerable time. All right, I need to get to World Language. On my paper it says 18 and 19. There we go. Spent considerable time on this document as a guide for students and parents about world language at the middle level. At the middle level, students are able to get through a level 2 course in languages. What parents need to understand is these are the same courses that their children will be taking at the high school level. So Stacy and I wanted to be sure that students and parents and counselors and teachers were clear about the rigor in a course like in courses like this offered at the middle level. So Mrs. Van Zandt?
Do you want me to speak now, Dr. Knapp?
Yes.
Oh,
please.
okay, I beg your pardon. I thought it was further down. I really don't have much to add other than what you just said. That was worded perfectly, and thank you. It was really through Dr. McNeil's guidance that we were able to accomplish this. Previously, students were able to take either an exploratory program in 7th grade, where it was one quarter of either French, German, or Spanish, and then the 4th quarter was a library study, I believe. And then if they did that in 8th grade, they could take a level 1, which would allow them to go to level 2 at the high school level. Or they could begin with level 1 in 7th grade and then go to level 2 in 8th grade, which would allow them to go to level 3 at the high school level. Now, because we have the wonderful Marsh Creek Center, students are being exposed in 6th grade now to languages. They choose from French, German, or Spanish, and it is 2 days of the cycle for the entire year. And that's giving them, we feel, a much broader exposure. And then they are coming to, pardon me, I need to cough up. They're coming to level 1 at the middle school. So we had a concern that, what if all students aren't ready for the same rigor that is the level 1 high school class? And that's where we had researched other districts that were spreading a level 1 course over 2 years. So the students have the opportunity to do level 1A in 7th grade and level 1B in 8th grade. And it's the same course, just stretched out. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Well, more a comment, just that when we first opened the middle schools, that's what we offered, and we got away from that because we said it wasn't successful. So I'm just surprised we're going back.
Well, we're going to collect data so we can support that, that we think it will be successful this way. And we've rewritten the curriculum that's more in line with ACTFL, the American Council for the Teachers of Foreign Language, and how many school districts across the country are, the direction that we are searching for is that the students are acquiring the language, and it's no longer a drill and kill format where you're just memorizing your verbs so you can spit them out on a test. And then we want to see kids that can actually, utilize their skills when they get older in the job.
I don't disagree, I'm just pointing out that when we opened the middle school, that was the philosophy and that was the thought. And then a number of years later, they said, no, we want to. That's fine.
Okay.
I personally like the change. I had one child of mine who wasn't successful with the level 1 right out of the gate, and I think that this is a nice option for them, so I'm glad you brought it back.
And we feel the level 1A2 is a nice transition from the 6th grade level, where it is only that 2-day period in the 6 days, which really, if you think, I guess, is more like 2 days every 8, if you count the weekends. So they have had the exposure to the language, and they've had that beginner feeling. They've been listening to the target language. So it's not as abrupt of a transition when they're entering into level 1 in 7th grade.
No, and I don't have any problem with it. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, I'm glad to hear the course has changed, that it'll be successful. I guess it's more a matter of talking to some teachers who maybe used to teach it and find out what part of it wasn't successful, so we don't fall into the same trap again.
That's a great suggestion.
Why wasn't it successful, or can we be
Mrs. Van Zandt, if you would just stay put for just 1 minute. Mrs. Billingham, you're at the controls there. If you could scroll all the way down, because there is a section here that Mrs. Van Zandt added to encourage students. I think we would need to go to the next page. There we are. At the middle level, some students will take level 1 of a language and then repeat that level at the high school. Since there is no credit at the middle level, they can do that. So what Mrs. Van Zandt added here were some considerations when you're making that decision for students and parents to think about. So Stacy, I don't know if you want to just quickly summarize what you have here.
Well, the good news is that the majority of the students don't do that, thankfully. I have talked to some students when I've gone to West to see the classes, and I was like, well, how did you get back in a level 2 class or this and that? And some of the students were concerned that either they didn't feel as prepared as they thought they could be, or that they wanted to get the high school A. But as you can see, if you look toward the bottom of the screen here, where the bold print is, it says that colleges prefer to see the proficiency in one language. So we want to try and keep the students on the same path in that one language. And really, unless it's absolutely recommended and it was a conversation with the family that the student retake the level, we want to dissuade them from doing that and really progress as far as they can go.
Thank you, Mrs. Van Zandt.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Dr. Indeglio, Mr. Ross, anything you would like to add about the handbook? Anything else?
No, other than the world language changes and the phys ed changes of the health class that we just, I think the rest of it is pretty much the same.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
Mrs. Crane?
On page 7, when it talks about the Downtown Cyber Academy, it references DDA. Didn't we move away from that?
You are correct.
That whole section, I think, needs to be updated.
Thank you, Mrs. Crane. We'll make sure that we get that corrected before the book is published.
Mrs. Burkhardt?
Well, I know it's not very popular, but I am somewhat concerned in that my understanding of the discussion last year was that we would still make it clear that students should need to take one art, one music, one home ec, and one PE course in the 2 years that they're in the school. And I understand it's not in the booklet, it's just spelled out because students have to essentially get that into their schedule anyway, but it makes me very uncomfortable that it's not part of the requirement. When we started the middle school years ago, it was making sure that our children had well-rounded education and had opportunities in some of the different areas. And I'm very concerned that it will lead children away from taking a gym course, or away from ever seeing another art course, or away from taking a family and consumer science course. And those subjects, quite frankly, I feel are very important to 12 and 13-year-olds. And I'd rather see them take a family and consumer science course than 3 engineering courses. Because they can build all they want in an engineering course, but they still need to know some of the basics that in everyday life. So I understand that some administrators do not want that verbiage in, but the reason I supported the change in giving to selection was that my understanding was there would still be some limitations. It just, they never see another PE course because they don't like PE. That's
They have to take PE at high school.
But they won't take it at all in middle school? I don't think I don't think it's healthy. I really don't. And I think it goes away from the model that we set up when we started these middle schools back in 1995, 96. And I sat in on all the strategic plans of those middle schools. I think this is a very, it's not a change that I would support. I absolutely get they don't need 2 years, but I think they should have to take 1 year.
But Mrs. Bertoni, even though it's not written, in practice, it is happening that students have 6 elective choices. Is that right, principals?
Correct.
And so they are taking elective courses except where other things may prevent them. For example, if they have special needs and need specialized courses, which we know is historically an
If it's
issue.
going on anyway, I don't understand why it's not spelled out in the book.
One of the reasons we don't want to spell it out specifically is for that exact reason. Let me give a very specific example. I understand the argument about when this first went into practice and the idea for exposure. However, there are many students who don't get exposure to Every Encore, and that takes place every year because they are receiving perhaps a curriculum support class, a gifted class, a math extensions class, a functional strategies class, a social dynamics class, etc. This year, with the addition of the advanced writing class, which means 4 times a cycle, that limits by 1 encore. Students who take double musics, it limits how many they can take. These are very special circumstances that have always existed. We're working on the data. We'll actually present it shortly. That shows there's been no change to that this year. The students who don't have those special needs have 6 choices in the schedule and take all 6 of those. We feel that that language would be very complicating because for the students who do have and are taking these special classes, it's going to create a need to over-explain an abundance of information that's already clear and happening anyway. And that's data that we'll present, but that's one of the main reasons. We don't want to make kids stick out that look like sore thumbs, especially the ones who are in, let's say, learning support, taking the gifted support that might otherwise be targeted. So that's just one of the reasons.
But those requirements have always been there. Prior to last year, those requirements were in there, and you still were able to schedule that gifted and special ed and all those other things. You still worked around it for those students that needed it, and I'm concerned about the students that don't need it.
We never stated, it's never been stated in the book before that they would have exposure to all. So we've never had that stated.
No, they were required to take it every year.
Okay,
That was
but
the-
kids-
There was no
But they're
requirement
saying
that they did it that way,
reality,
that's
kids
just the
don't.
way it was scheduled, it was just scheduled that way, it wasn't required that they do it that way,
Yes.
it's just the way it was done.
If you're taking curriculum support 4 times per cycle, that's 2 encore courses you aren't getting. So what we always do in the scheduling process is we look at what they had in 6th grade or 7th grade, not 6th grade anymore, and then the following year we try to make sure they get ones
So
that
you're
are
telling me there are any regular ed children that aren't going to take at least one, that are going to be able to avoid a gym, an art, or
No, there are some regular ed kids who are taking the advanced writing or the contemporary writing course. There's Math X is for regular ed kids.
But I'm concerned about that. I want them to have a well-rounded education, and I think that when you don't make it as part of the norm, that you're taking that away from them. And that goes back to my argument that then they'll take the extra PE classes and never see an art class. I don't think that's healthy. I think that it was part of the requirements in the schools were sort of initiated. I mean, there are teachers who are around that. It's part of the course selection, correct?
You know, I'll just try to throw the health aspect in here. I mean, if we are looking at a generation of students who are not going to outlive us, a large part because of obesity, I do believe that gym is a very critical component of their education. So I just want to throw that out there. I mean, we have a group of students who will not outlive us. That has never happened in our history. That's really sad. And a large part, again, is obesity, inactivity, computers, poor nutrition. So I'm just throwing the nursing home out there.
And I look at even, the advanced writing course, that if they're gonna continue to take all this English and they're never gonna take family and computer science or an art, I have a problem with that. Or music, we're not gonna be involved in music anymore because we love writing so much, we're just gonna take writing.
I hear you, and I appreciate that view, but I also have to say I like the flexibility that's being offered.
You're
And
not eliminating it.
no, you are. And I have to say, I thought that there were requirements for certain things when my children were in middle school. I didn't realize they could have had some flexibility, and I wish I did. It's a little frustrating to me to hear that some kids didn't take certain things, because I thought they had to. So all I'm going to say is beat the drum that I always beat, is make sure that everything is clearly explained to parents, because especially when it's your oldest child, are not aware, and these handbooks are fabulous, but you know, as parents yourselves, you don't get to read everything. You don't always get everything in a timely way from your students in order to read it. So the more that you can explain things like the foreign languages, is an awesome emphasis on the fact that a first-year language is a high school class, even in 7th grade. Again, you just don't know those things when you're first going through. So the more you can share that and repeat it so people hear it is awesome.
And I have to say that I think the principal's emphasis on encouraging the encores to create new and more interesting courses will grab kids to want to take that course rather than, okay, here's the course and we've been schlepping kids through it for the last 25 years, whether they like it or not, it's required, so they have to sit through it. That emphasis on courses that are interest-based, that kids want to take. I mean, Eric McCumsey surveyed the kids to see what they might be interested in taking, and they crafted a course around their interests. We looked at TPRS at Marsh Creek to say, okay, what does level 1 and level 1A need to shift to look like for the kids who are currently in the middle level? So this customization and personalized learning is the school of the future that we're trying to make the school of today. So I think what we're going to see is not fewer kids taking encores, but courses being crafted where kids are saying, beating down the doors to, I want to take this course, I want to take that course, because they're more interesting and more kid-centered and kid-focused, what the kids are interested in.
And shouldn't they have the opportunity in school to take things that maybe they wouldn't take outside of school? There are a lot of our students who do physical activity or music or other things outside of the school day, that they might not get an engineering class another way, or they might not get an advanced writing class another way other than in school. So if we offer that flexibility within the curriculum, that's a bonus. I always think flexibility is good. I mean, if you try to make it a one-size-fits-all for everyone, you're not making everybody happy either.
Mrs. Crane.
In the spirit of a compromise, because I see both sides here, maybe a statement about, in the course selection book, about, you know, we encourage kids at this age to take, you know, expand, take a music, take an art, take a PE, take family and consumer science. We encourage that, you know, just to explore that, because it is at an age where maybe they're a little bit too young to make the choices on their own, but they should be exposed to things that maybe, if they were allowed to make the choice, they would. And that way you're not saying this is the way it's going to be for every child, but we think this is a good idea.
Well, secondly, I agree with everything, including what Jane's saying, but maybe we use this as a research tool for a while, a year. We've been through this year. So we asked the guys to come back and tell us how many kids took what percentage of the 7th grade class took what courses, what percentage of the 8th grade class took what courses, and then in another slide, how many students did not take, because I agree with phys ed, and I really do. I agree with that. How many students did not take phys ed? And how many students did not take art this year? How many students did not take music? And then, now that you have that in 7th grade, you use it as a group to go into 8th grade. You track it. And let's see how bad it is. Because I have to tell you, if it's bad and we've got, let's just say, hundreds of kids not taking phys ed, I'm concerned, and I think you two would be also.
Absolutely.
I think you two would be concerned also.
Yeah,
The
and
same goes for art and music also.
Well-
And I would argue that when you're saying 1 out of the 2 years, you're still offering the opportunity of some choice. You're not
Right.
saying they have to take it both years, which is what it used to do.
But I'm thinking, if we let it play out, let's see how many don't take it, because we're only in year 1. So if we let it play out next year, we follow this 7th grade class to 8th. Let's see how many kids don't get one of the encores. And let's see how bad the damage is, and we reassess after that. But I kind of listening to everything, Jane, I know you're a pragmatic person, I'd like to see it play out before we institute some sort of hard no. Let it play out. Let's just see, and if it is bad, hey, I agree with you, we adjust it next year at this time. Guys will have the data. As a matter of fact, they'll have the data sooner than this time. Once we select courses, we'll kind of know the data. That'll be my thoughts. Up to you.
Anything else?
This is Franny.
Oh, sorry.
Pretty sure. This has to do with Project Lead the Way, so I think it's for Mr. Spears. The design and modeling and automation and robotics, it says 8th grade. Do they have to take either of the other two Project Lead the Way classes as prerequisite for those?
Well, it's not a formal pre-req,
But they do.
but it does just when they're offered. So yes,
Oh, I
they're offered in 7th grade, they have 2 choices, and in 8th grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that an 8th grader can take one of those two without having taken one of the other ones in 7th grade?
Absolutely.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
I just wanted to express a concern from the music department in regards to the choice of middle school students to choose to or to not take music classes in 7th and 8th grade. It is possible for an art student to not take art class in 7th, but then enroll in 8th, and it would not interfere their achievement. But for a music student to leave a year worth of training and a year of experience and then try to re-enter the music program with peers who have had all of that experience, I think that they will be a year behind. I think it would be really devastating for a student to drop an instrument, especially, and not touch it for an entire year to try to re-enroll in 8th grade. So I would just encourage the guidance department when speaking with students about registering for classes that they are aware, even though they may think that it's possible to drop everything for 7th grade and join again in 8th, I think that would really impede their progress.
What about general music, Mrs.
General music is a standalone course, so if they did drop in 7th, they could come back in 8th, and that would be a brand new refresher. They would be okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay to move this forward, board? Good discussion. Next item is field trip.
Field trips, and it's my pleasure to share field trip information with you this month. So first, our trip proposed to the Eastern State Penitentiary by our social studies. I know, I snickered too. I won't tell you what question I asked because it will show my ignorance. But this looks pretty cool. It's a sociology course, right, Ms. Jackson? And do you want to speak to it at all? Or?
There's a museum on site. Obviously, this is a non-functioning prison site that does house a fairly large museum, which does align with the curriculum for the sociology, especially for students that are considering some kind of a criminal justice career. And it was brought up as for East High School to take 2 classes, almost more like a pilot, because no one's been there before, and to just go as adults, we wouldn't have the same lens as taking students. So we'll be using it to gather feedback from them as to whether or not it's a worthwhile trip that we might want to propose for the bank for both high schools for next year.
That makes sense, to go once and then evaluate it with students as well as the teacher
Right.
present.
Because we did discuss just having the adults go and pretty much check it out. But I've done that in the past, and I find that's a very different experience when the adults go as to when you take students, and then to debrief them and get their perspective on it, because we really do see things a little bit differently.
So that's a one-time. And then Lamoureux Farm, and I believe that Mr. Tucker, who is orchestrating our visitors from China, is orchestrating this trip as well. Would you like to just talk to us a little bit about this, Mr. Tucker? And we have slides, correct?
Yeah, there are 3 slides if they want, or we can do it without her.
There we go.
Oh, cool. Okay, this is the same group that each year we send a group of teachers in the summertime to teach in Hebei, which is a province in China. This time, students are coming to visit. They have in the past, but on this occasion, we have 12 students that will be coming. There'll be 6 at 6th grade center, 3 in the middle school, and 2 at STEM Academy. Should have 12, I think. And 2 chaperones, and they will spend a full 2 weeks in the classrooms with the students. Their primary focus will be practicing their English. These are highly English literate students. They're not just beginning to study language. And we're hoping to use their technology. They have the cell phones, they don't have iPads, but they'll be using the Google Apps and WeChat in order to collaborate in defining the terms and working on their language in the classes while they're there. My hope is that it's not a passive visit. In other words, where they're just sort of there and in the class and bored, but that they're actively working on their language mastery, sometimes with the students they're next to, but also digitally with the other 11 students in the cloud simultaneously. And I'll be monitoring that along with other teachers. So it should be interesting.
And so what about the trip to the farm?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
What about the pony ride? Okay.
How to say pony and
Well, that's the awkward part. They have an invite
do we have a slide that shows this farm? No.
No.
Oh, okay.
That's the awkward, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Being winter right now, the visitors are hoping to visit the farm. Right now, we're not sure it's going to come off because they have to bring extra horses and handlers in, and with the snow and the mud, if that doesn't happen, we're going to punt and try and go to Longwood Gardens.
Pony ride.
Oh, trust me, they would much rather go to the farm. And ride
So we
horses.
probably, since there's, an option, we might want to do 2 forms and just indicate Longwood Gardens. That way, board, you would be clear that if the children didn't go to the farm because of whatever weather conditions, that they would be going to Longwood Gardens. Okay?
If it's okay.
All right, yes, thank you, Mr. Thank you for all that you're doing to make that happen. Okay, our other field trip is a foreign exchange. So it's not typically a foreign exchange program because the children aren't going to be living with host families and we're not going to exchange students. But there was a sufficient evidence that children would be in the country learning that we classified it as a foreign exchange. So these are STEM students who will be completing service hours required for their CAS project and their graduation projects at East and West. So these are summer dates, July of 17. They have this in early enough for the board's approval that they can begin making travel arrangements to get good prices now.
Questions or comments?
I did have a question we went over before. Just out of curiosity, what is there protocol for going abroad and knowing where you're going, what areas are safe and what are not safe? What's the protocol to plan trips?
So I did ask that question of the principals, and what they responded was that they inquire with their teachers, and they also inquire through the travel agency, that the travel agencies that they use are the ones they rely on most for that type of information about security, because these children will be traveling to villages, so that the travel service that they're using has assured us that the places are safe for travel for children. But that is what we've been doing, Mr. Crane. Whether we could do more, I'm not sure. And maybe Mrs. Van Zandt is a good person to ask that question, because many of our overseas trips are through the World Language Department, outside of our exchange with the Danes, which for the first time happened this year. Most trips are through World Language. So I'm putting you on the spot, Mrs. Van Zandt, but
Can I just follow? Is there anything, where the principals or the organizers, the travel agents, get in contact with a local embassy or a consulate that's near where they are, just to go over that itinerary and ask them if there's any problems that they be concerned with.
They have not done this current day. And I don't know, Mrs. Van Zandt, if teachers do that. We did ask about clearances as well. And the teachers responded, the teachers who have gone on trips, that other countries don't have the same standards as the United States in terms of asking people for clearances. So it is not standard protocol in countries across the ocean to have folks apply for clearances. Mrs. Van Zandt? do you want to
In my
add?
experience with the exchanges that I've run, either in England or with Germany or the Spanish-speaking countries, it's been regularly understood that there's insurance required, so the dialogue things have been discussed to ensure that there is safety. Now, the teacher that's proposing this too, because it is the service hours, I did not find out, or I wasn't informed, I guess, what the name of the company is, but I was under the impression that all of those things are taken care of by the company with whom you organize. It is a wonderful question because particularly there are certain places where we wouldn't consider taking a group of students because of safety issues and concerns. Are there political problems? Are there problems of violence in the area? So would you like me to delve into that further and see if there's anything perhaps in print with the companies that are connecting with our students and our teachers?
Yeah, the policy that they have.
Sure.
So, Mrs. Van Zandt, I have an email from Mr. Campbell. He said this is EF Tours that they're using.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. And EF Tour, they're a huge company that they do worldwide exchanges and tours for the students, and they're very well known.
One thing while you're inquiring that I might ask too, I know a little bit about EF Tours, but I was wondering when you said villages about medical care, or does a nurse travel with this group? You know, in some school districts, they, not necessarily for a group like this, but there are some times where they do take a nurse and a counselor depending on how long they're going to be gone. I didn't know if we've ever explored that. I was thinking about that as Mr. Green was speaking. But they may supply a nurse. I don't know what EF Tours does, but that might be.
In the past, in my experience on trips that I've participated, we have not had a nurse on the actual trip, but we've always been in close proximity to medical care.
Yes.
Just to speak to that, the regulations are, and the states are starting to get kind of strict with this. If we supply a nurse that goes out of Pennsylvania, that nurse does not have a license to practice nursing outside the state of Pennsylvania. And this is from the state. Therefore, if there is a field trip outside the state of Pennsylvania, the nurse has to write for permission to that nursing board to ask for an exemption in order to practice nursing outside of that state. So, I mean, and it also applies internationally too. I mean, we are just getting, nursing right now is really getting bombarded with a lot of mandates and that. So just so you kind of keep that tucked away, because you want a nurse to go, we need enough time to get a response to that nursing board in whatever state or country it is.
Do we have any experience with how long that process might even take?
You know what, this is kind of like a new frontier for us. So, my experience with dealing with their own Pennsylvania Board of Nursing, their response time is really not that great.
Would be my expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another tough hurdle. Good point. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
that.
you're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
So Mrs. Simonelli, we have one more field trip that did not make the list, and I know Mr. Ross is excited to ask for permission for his students to go on a trip to Washington DC. Maybe Mr. Ross, I don't want to spoil the surprise that some people might not know. So can you tell us?
Surprise.
Well, it might be for some people.
You can do it, Dr. McNeil, go ahead.
So Mr. Ross's team is this the first year this is how many years that you've won the Future
Second time in 3 years.
Future Cities competition? So they won again, and this year, Mr. Ross, I understand you also won the regional essay
Best essay,
competition?
yes.
The first time. And I think
Yes.
one of our curriculum leaders might have been instrumental, along with your
Quite instrumental.
The writing teachers.
the writing teachers, and I think we need to just share that Mr. Ross has been very active in promoting cross-curricular writing. So the writing teachers are working with the content teachers so that children are writing across the curriculum. And we think that could have been instrumental in this victory, right, Mrs. Carney?
Yes.
Yes. So Mr. Ross would like to take his students to Washington. He'd like to take a bus full of students, not just the students who won the competition.
Yeah, what happens is the kids who were on the presenting team, the 3 kids who were the presenters and the 1 alternate, they get, along with the teacher, Guy Raines, they get all expenses, well not all expenses, they get a room at the hotel for the length of the competition. And it goes from Saturday, the 13th, I believe, of February, until that following Wednesday. It's a multi-day experience. But the actual finals, the competition itself, the kids will be presenting on Monday, the 15th. And then the following morning, they announce who makes the national finals. So as we did 2 years ago, we'd like to take the remaining team members down on a bus that Monday morning, allow them to be there to see their team's national presentation and get to experience that, because they played a role in that. They helped write the essay, they helped do the computer work, they helped write the presentation, they built the model. They all played a role in that. So we'd like to take them down, let them see that presentation, let them experience, they get a free tour of Washington, D.C. As part of that as well. And then stay the night, Monday night, and then get to see, if and when we make the national finals, get to see that presentation and that experience as well. And then return on that Tuesday afternoon.
And we could probably count on your tweeting that out if you win.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So board, we'll have the paperwork for you to review. We just weren't able to have it in a timely manner for today. If that's
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Okay. We have good to move all the trips forward, everyone? Okay. Thank you, everyone. I think that concludes our action agenda. Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, program information, Dr. McNeil.
Thank you, Mrs. Simonelli. So first on our agenda today is a report from Mrs. Byrne on PBOS, and she's going to let us know what that Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment System is up to.
Great. We need like a little table. It'd be like banner, right? All right, so PBOS results are in. It took some time. We still don't have all the state reporting yet. Like, we have not seen federal mandated reporting yet, which was due months ago. And I've emailed the state several times, and they said they'll let me know when it's going to be ready. So I guess I'll stop emailing them. The PBOS student projections have been out, and we continue to use projections in our buildings in order to increase student learning. Last year we talked about the projections, and that whole time. This year we're going to talk about the growth and achievement reporting. And if there's any questions as I go through this, please let me know. But quickly before we get started, just real quickly what is new this year, and this is in the area of projections. This year
Can you just for the global audience, just give us a clear understanding of what PBOS is?
Okay, what PBOS is it takes students' past testing history and makes projections. It says how they would do in an AP class. It can project now how they can do it in an ACT class. It'll project how the students do in the next year of state testing. So we get PBOS results starting at 4th grade. We don't get them for 3rd grade because that's the first year students actually take the PSSA. So at 4th grade, we start getting PBOS results, and that tells us how students are projected to do in that grade level. PBOS also is part of the teacher evaluation plan, and that has to do with how well students actually do compared to how they were projected to do. And students for this statistical analysis serve as their own control group, so we're not comparing apples and oranges, we're comparing the achievement and the growth of the same set of students. So it's not like we're comparing different groups of kids. So new this year, there is a college and career readiness projections, and that has the achievement probability for how students would do if they were to take an ACT course, an AP exam. Now, the AP part is for selected courses. So for instance, and nothing against the Encore courses, but there's no AP projections for how students would do in a music class or an AP art class because there's no state testing that deals with those subjects. So there are a foreign language. So we don't have data for that, however we have for the sciences and the ELAs and the math and all those things. For the ACT, PSAT, and SAT, the projections are based on students obtaining college benchmark results. So if you do this well on the PSSA and the Keystone exam, you could be projected to reach the college benchmark or maybe not. So most of those AP projections are based on getting a student to get a 3 or a 4 on any of the exams, like especially an AP or SAT, and that has something to do with placement of students in courses. So it's just another way of looking to say, oh, here's a batch of students we maybe weren't thinking of, and maybe we need to get some of those kids into those more rigorous courses. What we're going to talk today about is the PBOS scatter plots, and we want to look at how we did achievement and growth-wise compared to the other schools in Pennsylvania. We looked at the scatter plots many, many years ago, but they have obviously changed. You're going to see a few things on there, such as the average growth index and what that looks like for a cohort of students. If we get a close score to 0, that means we met the PA growth expectation for our cohort of students. Did they do what they were supposed to do? If we have greater than a 0, it means we exceeded expectations. It means we grew our students more than they were expected to based on their prior testing history. And if we get less than 0, unfortunately, it means we did not meet that growth expectation with those students. Like I said before, please keep in mind we're not comparing apples and oranges here, we're comparing the same students to themselves. And I think it's important to look at these scatter plots because as everybody knows, the results this year weren't as good as we're used to them being, but we need to see how we did compared to everybody else and that there were many good things to celebrate. So if you look at this scatter plot, this is just an example. The vertical axis shows the achievement, which will be the percentage of students who are advanced or proficient. If you look across the bottom, you'll see the average growth index. So there's that 0. If we're right on around that 0 area, it means we met expectation. If we end up to the right, it means we exceeded, and if we end up to the left, it means we did not make enough growth with those students. Now when we look at Downingtown, each one of those little gold spots will represent a district, a school in Pennsylvania, and Downingtown will be the blue squares. Though we don't get to pick our own colors of gold and blue, every district in the state of Pennsylvania got our school colors. All right, so if we look at this, everybody wants to be up in that first quadrant, the upper right-hand corner, because everyone wants to be high achieving and high growing. That's the excelling quadrant, it's called. If you look to the upper left, we're high achieving, but we're lower growth. That's the flipping quadrant. It means you're showing achievement, but you're not showing growth. If you look at the third quadrant, which is lower achieving and lower growth, where nobody wants to be, that's underperforming. And if you look to the lower right, that would be the improving, which means you're underachieving, but you're showing growth. So you're a school that's in some form of improvement, and that improvement is working. Obviously, everybody wants to be in the upper right-hand corner. I think the importance of looking at this data is because it's one thing for me to tell you what happened. It's something very different to actually see it in data and let the graph speak 1,000 words to show you what really happened. All right, that's our 4th grade data. If you look on the left-hand side, that's ELA for last year. If you look on the right-hand side, that's math. Our 10 schools are represented by those blue little squares there. All right, so this is all the schools that have a 4th grade in the state of Pennsylvania. There are many, many up there. All right, if you look at ELA, 8 of our schools were in quadrant 1. 2 of our schools are in that higher achieving but lower growth area. For math, we have 8 schools again in that upper right-hand quadrant, and 2 who again are showing high achievement but not so much growth. Something to remember, last year's average for advanced and proficient for ELA was 68%. This year the state was 59%. There was a 9% decrease.
Kelly, I'm sorry, we don't have, where do we have schools in the lower quadrant? Are there schools in the lower?
None of ours.
Just the second, first and second.
You're right, first and second. Right, okay.
Just ours.
Got it.
Now, the thing about math, and we talked about this
You're
before.
gonna have a heart attack. I knew that was the case. Got nervous here.
And a significant drop in math. The average for math in 2014 was 76% advanced and proficient for the state of Pennsylvania. Last year in math, the average was 44% advanced and proficient. That was a 32% decrease from one year to the next. As you know, math took the most significant hit on the new test. All right? And you see here, Downingtown has its own examples of relatively high-performing schools who are also showing growth with their students. So kudos to those schools for doing an excellent job. Any questions on 4th grade?
Are the 2 in the lower growth for each, are they the same schools? Is it pretty much lined up?
No.
Okay.
One of them is in common, but not relatively same position, but no, there's three of them. All right, 5th grade. 5th grade, if we look here, this is all the 5th grade schools in the state of Pennsylvania. ELA, we have 5 schools in quadrant 1, and we also have 5 schools over in higher achieving but lower growth. For math, we have 9 schools in quadrant 1 for 5th grade math, and 1 in that higher achieving but lower growth. And all of our buildings did perform above the NCE of 50, which is a growth standard in the state of Pennsylvania. If you look here, in 2014, ELA had an average of 60% advanced and proficient. Last year was 62. So 5th grade ELA was the one test that actually increased in the state average from 14 to 15. For math, it went from 67% was the average to 43% of the students in Pennsylvania are advanced and proficient. That's a 24% drop for math. 5th grade questions? 6th grade? 6th grade, this is all the 6th grade in the state of Pennsylvania. We performed above the state average in both ELA and math. In ELA, we were in the first quadrant, and we did show growth for ELA. In math, we were high performing. As you can see, we're vertically pretty much up there, but we did not show growth. We have lower growth than we had hoped. And that school and the principal and the teachers are working hard to figure out how to get that growth back. So that is something they're working on this year. Questions on 6th? All right, on to 7th grade. 7th grade, if you look, both ELA and math performance was above the state NCE of 50. They're both also in quadrant 1 for math and for ELA, which is wonderful. If you look at ELA from 2014, the state average was 72% advanced and proficient. If you look in 2015, it was 59% advanced and proficient, so the state dropped 13%. If you look at math in 2014 was 75%. If you look in 2015, the state fell to 33% advanced and proficient in math in 7th grade. That was a 42% decrease. So we were less than half what we were the year before.
Yeah, now Kelly, that's really interesting, but look at that ELA, whatever school that is, there's only 2 other schools that showed more growth
Right, that's what I say, that's another prime example of relatively high performing and also showing excellent growth, because that is definitely out there. And our math is all, there's some that are above us based on growth, but we're right up there at the top. Okay, 8th grade. If we look at 8th grade, there are 2 schools again, both ELA and math were above the state average, and for ELA, both are in quadrant 1, both schools. For math, one is in quadrant 1, and the other one is high performing but lower growth. Not too far off, we're probably in that standard deviation where we went, say we had too much, that we didn't have enough growth, we were just in that area where it could vary a little bit. 8th grade teachers, math teachers are working very tirely to try to get this work figured out, and how do we take those lower performing students and move them up? How do we deal with the disconnect of kids taking Algebra 1 and not taking 8th grade math? Because that's what you're seeing up here, is that disconnect that happened, and how do we fix that? And with the new Every Student Succeeds Act, we hope to see some changes finalized about that sooner than later. For ELA in 8th grade, the prior year was 79% advanced and proficient. This year was 58%. That was a 21% drop. In math in 8th grade in 2014, there was 73% of the kids in the state were advanced and proficient. This year, 30% of the students for math were advanced and proficient in 8th grade. That was a 43% decrease in 8th grade math. So as you can see, everything isn't rosy because our scores did fall. However, when you look at our achievement and our growth, we did outperform many, and in most cases, we're right up there at the top. Okay, next is science. The science test did not say. If you look over on the right left side, that's grade 4 science. Grade 8 science is to the right here. For grade 8, we're kind of sitting on that. In between there, we're on the 0 line of just meeting expectation. If you look at 4th grade, many of our schools, 9 of them, are in quadrant 1, and one of them is really close to that maintaining. Okay? The next thing we'll look at really quickly is our scatter plots. For our secondary schools, for Keystones, these tests did not change. And these are not based on percentage of advanced and proficient. This is based on your average scaled scores. So if you look at lit, all 3 of our schools are in quadrant 1 and above the state average. For algebra, we have 3 schools in quadrant 1, which are above the state average, and 2 that are in a lower achievement but higher growth. And the issue with that is the 2 in the lower end are 2 comprehensive high schools. And the reason for that, you have to remember, is many of our math students that are towards the top of our performers took Algebra 1 in 7th grade and Algebra 1 in 8th grade. And when we look at their results, they're up in that quadrant 1. So by the time we took those students off, and the kids who took Algebra 1 for the first time was in high school, and then the performance there wasn't quite up with the others. So that's what happened there.
This isn't the graduation cohort, which
No, this is the kids who were first-time test takers last year.
This is first-time test takers.
Yep. All right. Anything else on those keystones? George, have no fear, I'm getting there. All right, biology. Biology, if you look, all 3 of those schools were in quadrant 1 and are above the average. Again, you can see to the far right up at the top, a very high-performing school district, a very high-performing school, and definitely growing students. You can't go too much further than that one up there.
Since Mr. Cruz is a biology teacher, congratulations, it's good stuff. And the science department chair is applauding. We'll go to all about George. George. Good stuff. All hail George. Good stuff.
So what we can see from this, we have a lot of things, a lot of strengths, we have a lot of things to celebrate. You do notice there's some areas that we need to work on, and we have been working on that to show progress, and hopefully we'll see progress this year and have even more increased results than we had before.
Well, it's an interesting picture, Kelly, because the deflated effect of just looking at the scores across the district, teachers, parents, when we send all the scores out, we're like, oh my God, my kids did worse. When you look at this, you see that the schools are in the top tier everywhere. And if we think we did bad, just think where everybody else in the Commonwealth is. So it's kind of interesting in the PBOS analysis. Good stuff, thank you. See, Jane, that wasn't too bad.
I have one question.
Yes.
Do the parents ever get any kind of PFAS information that go with their schools?
No.
No.
Good from a public relations standpoint that we do something, Kelly, with Pat, maybe in a D-Link. You try to explain it.
I think it's over for this year.
I'd still like to take a crack at it, Jane. That's okay.
Bring up bad memories.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Byrne. Next up on our program information, educational technology update and video. Last month I shared a summary of the educational technology plan that Curriculum and Technology did present to the board on the 27th of January. So the board is considering the recommendations that were presented on the 27th. But one really exciting thing that we all saw on the 27th was a series of video clips that Mr. Blow put together from various elementary schools where technology was being used. So Mr. Blow, and if you want to give a better introduction than that.
That was a great introduction.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you. I know many of the teachers that helped out with this are in this room, and we appreciate all the time that we kind of invaded into your classroom, and we appreciate that. The most exciting thing when walking into these classrooms is seeing how excited and engaged our students are. Obviously, we have a big shift now in education as we look at how do we incorporate 21st century skills into all classrooms, K-12. And this video kind of shows us, even at the elementary level, how our students are exposed to those important skills like collaboration, creativity, communication. And our students are doing this in a variety of different ways in different apps. And it's very exciting to see how our students are self-directed learners now. And because of these tools, our teachers are able to provide more support, and we're able to have small groups and really do a station rotation model to really address the needs of all of our students. And as you'll see in this video, these kids are not bored, they're not angry, they're excited. So we appreciate all the time that you guys took for helping this video, and also what you're doing every single day in your classrooms. There isn't a single classroom that I walk into where I'm not seeing students engaged, and that's a testament to you as teachers and administrators. So thank you. This video, again, is just covering our elementary level. We're excited as we move through our technology plan to show you a video in the future of our high schools, and also an update of where we're at with our middle schools. So thank you.
Hi.
This is not the correct video.
Librarian, media specialist.
So we need to close this one. It should have been, it was emailed as a link.
rest of the Newfoundland slogan. So we used this project for Reader's Theater, and what we had to do was record and find pictures. When we recorded, one person would go, and then you would find a picture, and then you would play it. And we used iMovie for the Reader's Theater. And also we worked on this fluency and speaking clearly, and just practicing and reading and recording it to see how we sound. And I also use technology like laptops to research our floor. For example, me and my partner, we researched Henry Hudson.
Fifth grade using Reading Wonders on the iPad. What are you working on?
I'm reading the story Changing Goals by Vivian Joseph. I'm reading a story called When I Rise. I'm reading The Boy Who Invented TV. I'm reading Fausha. I'm reading Fausha also. I'm playing I'm doing Alchemist performance, and me and my friend Ryan are doing this on Google Drive, and it's actually really fun because I can send stuff to him and I can work with other people on Google Drive on like a slideshow and things like that. And in my classroom, I can use Reading Wonders app, which is on the iPad, and it's really fun because there's like so many games, and it's like we can all like have fun while learning. And when you write on the computer, it's not like this. It's kind of like a video thing, and at the end of this is a game. What?
They have been able to collaborate with other fifth graders at different schools that they've never met through technology. They've done exemplary work, and they have really demonstrated their understanding of digital citizenship through their collaborative piece. They have been respectful of each other. They have done phenomenal work with their bibliographies, creating citations, and they really have shown that they are capable of using technology through collaboration for educational purposes. The main goal of this project was to bring technology to the students in a way where they understood how it was used for educational purposes and they could see the possibilities of their future. And they have shown an amazing desire to learn. Their engagement is at an all-time high, and they have demonstrated that they are more than ready for the 21st century, and they are eager to learn how to use technology in the classroom.
In first grade, we are using iPads to access the Wonders site and then to do independent reading on the RazKids app. So the kids take turns throughout the day in different center type situations during daily life on Wonders, and they're practicing either reading stories, they're doing phonics games, word building, handwriting practice, skill practice, and then if they choose to do the RazKids site, then they're working on independent reading levels, building comprehension and their fluency, and they have a lot of fun doing everything. I found that the more time they have on the iPads, the happier and more excited they are themselves, so I'm very impressed with everything that they've done. Hi, my name is Kelly Ramsey. I teach fifth grade at Newfound Hills. One of the ways we use technology is Study Island. We use it for math and reading differentiated on their level. One that shows where the story says penguin comes from. Click on the one that shows where the story says penguin comes from. And then Ms. Ross, Newfound Hills first grade teacher. iPads are great because here you can see kids are able to use them for their learning centers. We have them on today, RazKids, where they get to read different stories and do comprehension questions based on their level. It really works well when I'm working with other students in their guided reading centers.
Hi, I'm Kevin Mullans, and I'm a learning support teacher at Newfound Hills Elementary School, and I'm working with one of my students here on technology. This is the technology that accompanies the System 44 reading program.
iPads for RazKids as well as doing Study Island online. We also use computers daily for Typing Pal and various assignments for students to write out in Word, as well as learning Excel and doing different bar graphs and so forth. One of the exciting things we're doing this year as well is working in conjunction with Google Docs, and students are actually putting online their actual reading logs. So those are just a few ways I use technology. I think it's extremely vital, and I'm very excited about the use of it in various ways.
Have iPads, desktops, and laptops in our building, and we use those for a host of things. Differentiating instruction, it certainly increases student engagement. We benchmark test using some of our technology. Our math and focus and our reading wonders are all online, and the students can access those books through the technology that we have. So it's really been wonderful, and we've really grown a lot in the last couple of years. But all in all, it's been wonderful. The technology integration at Downingtown has really been making the difference with our kids. It keeps those tools in their hands and makes them more successful.
Thank you, Mr. Blow. And I think Mr. Blow wanted to say that that was Ugly Sweater Day, and
Yes.
that's why you saw Mr. Gearing in that.
I don't know if that's actually true, but that's what he said.
Is that what he told you?
I don't believe it is. I think that's a typical sweater that Bob wears. I don't believe it.
So while Mrs. Billingham is looking to show the next set of slides, I believe Anne Marie Cowan and Aaron Prokop, two of our ESL teachers, have some materials for board members to look at through this presentation. If you remember the last time, last month, Anne Marie shared an overview of the English Language Development Program that's a McGraw-Hill ESL program that connects with Reading Wonders. So this month, we thought it might be important for you to actually see the materials and for the teachers to talk about how the program scaffolds what children are doing with Reading Wonders and what they would do in an ESL class.
Thank you. So while Anne Marie and I are playing Santa Claus here, what we're putting on your tables are some of the student editions at the 4th grade level. And then we also have several of the teacher editions as well. No, that's all I have. So what I'm going to do today is walk you through some of the 4th grade material so that you can see how the Wonders for ELD, English Language Development, lines up with the Reading Wonders materials that the kids are getting in their regular classroom, so that we can support our ELLs and make them feel as successful as they can be in their home classrooms. So last time we were here, Anne Marie and Dr. McNeil did a great job of sharing a little background on the program, why we think it would be so wonderful for our students to have, how we have this need for a core resource because ESL is core instruction. So next slide, please. Just a little bit of review is that we really would like this program to be part of our core instruction because we really love how it supports instruction in all 4 of the language domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. All of those so important for our ELLs to have support with. We really love how it correlates the same schedule as the Classroom Wonders with the stories and lessons and vocabulary. It's the same week to week and day to day. If you're familiar with the Wonders Classroom set, you know that it's a unit and a week and then a 6-day time frame within that week. And the Wonders for English Learners is set up the exact same way. So we like that the kids will be exposed to the same material when they come to ESL class as they're seeing in their regular classroom. So in the teacher editions, if you have one nearby to take a look at, we really liked how they focus on a daily language and a content objective. Those language objectives are so important for our kids. And they also give a lot of support to the teacher to be able to differentiate for the different levels of English language learners that we have. ESL is definitely not one size fits all. We have kids at all ends of the spectrum from all different backgrounds. So it's important to cover what every child needs, and we think that this program does a nice job of that. Scheduling is always a huge bear for us, as a lot of you know. And we liked that this program gives a suggested timeline and different options for a 30-minute or 45 or 60-minute class. For us, the reality is generally 30 minutes that our students have ESL every day. So we liked that we were able to pick and choose different components to be able to fit into those 30 minutes and make the most of it. As you just saw in John's video, there's so many resources online for Wonders. And through this Wonders for English Language Learners, the teachers can access those things and have the kids work on iPads or use the smartboard, and we can further support what the kids are doing in the classroom. Okay. So the student editions that you have in front of you are called a companion work text at the 4th grade level. At the kindergarten and 1st grade level, the books are called My Language Book, and they're a little bit different in that they don't include the story of the week. The kids would need to bring that book with them from their regular classroom to look back at. But from grades 2 through 5, it's called a companion work text, and it actually features the text in the book at a differentiated level. So you have two different books in front of you. The beginning level book is the thinner one, and it has a circle on it, and the intermediate advanced level is the thicker one that has a diamond and a square on it, I believe. I actually took out the bottom slide there. We're not going to look at the K1 materials today. We're just going to look at the 4th grade. So if you can switch to the next slide. So what we're going to do is walk through some major components of what kids are doing with Reading Wonders every week in their classrooms. We're going to go through the process of building background before the class reads a story. We're going to look at vocabulary. We're going to look at doing a shared read, doing some comprehension, and also some writing. So if first we're looking at building background, so if you have the books in front of you, you're going to want to go to page 4 in your skinny book, your circle book, and page 76 of the thicker book. So go ahead and move to the next one. Oh, this is not the updated slideshow. I'm sorry. There was a second one that Dr. McNeil and I had sent that had screenshots in it. Do we know how to access the newer one that we sent yesterday?
I mean, I sent it, I don't know.
Yeah, I had sent it yesterday, and it had pictures in it, because I knew not everybody was going to have a book. I sent it to Tony, and Dr. McNeil also sent it to Tony and I. So while we're hopefully pulling up the slideshow, if you're on those pages in the book, you're going to see a picture of a squirrel. He's trying to get something to eat. So that's your building background page, and the teacher would pull this up in the regular classroom and get a conversation going about what's the daily theme that we're talking about, what's the weekly essential question, and it gives the students a chance to start talking about the topic and start exploring what they're going to be learning about. So what I'm hoping to do is show you on the screen what the regular Wonders text looks like in the regular classroom, and then compare it to what is in the Reading Wonders for English Language Learners, which is in your books on your table.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure, absolutely.
Do these English language learners get a regular Reading Wonders book as well?
Yes, they do. Yes. So they are in the regular classroom for Reading Wonders time. And depending on scheduling, like I said, it's very tricky for us being in multiple buildings. Usually the ESL students are pulled out during some of their language arts time. So they're still getting the Reading Wonders in their regular classroom, and then they would also be getting the additional instructional time with us. Sometimes it doesn't work out as well as it should, and we need to take other time periods during the day, but that's kind of how it's envisioned.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does the, ELL program, like the specific units, mimic the unit that
Yes.
the teacher is
Yes.
working on at the time?
It's the same unit, the same essential question,
Okay.
the same story. What you're going to see is that the story itself, the text is simplified and leveled, so it's more accessible. The vocabulary is leveled, so it's more accessible for the ELLs, but it's the same literature, a lot of the same vocabulary, same skills. So that's why we really liked it, because we felt like we can give our students in the small ESL setting the confidence to go back to their regular classroom and say, oh, I know these words now, I can talk about this story. Whereas in their home classroom, when they're in a large group, it's very overwhelming, it's very intimidating if they're not sure of how to speak to something or they don't want to participate because they're feeling like they can't. So we really like this because it allows them to have that repetition and that practice in a smaller group. Yes?
Are there, if we go with this curriculum, are there materials that they might either carry between, or would they have something on their, assuming we get them to a device that they have to use all the time, would they have something on a device, something that they would have, they could, when they were in their regular classroom, they might be able to access some of the things that, resources that might help them in addition to
Yes.
just being in your class?
The short answer would be yes, I think. But what we're thinking, we're kind of creating a wish list now of the different parts of this program that we feel that we would like. Like I said, at the kindergarten and first grade level, in their work text, the stories are not in that book. So they would bring that reading, writing workshop book with them to ESL class. At this level, the fourth grade level, the stories are in the book, but they are the leveled stories. So they would be reading that one in ESL class, and then they would have their regular text in their regular classroom. And they would always be able to access all of the Wonders materials online with their iPads and laptops and things like that. Oh, hey, here it is. So there's our friend the squirrel. Back to building background. So this is a screenshot of the regular classroom Reading Wonders text. This is what the kids are seeing in their regular fourth grade classroom. So maybe the teacher would pull this up on the smart board, and this is meant to be a whole group activity. So if you're looking at this grade level text, it's assuming that these kids are native English speakers, that they can read all of this and they know what they're expected to turn to their partner and talk about. But if you're in ELL and you aren't ready to do all of those things, you're going to be a little deer in headlights and you're thinking, what am I supposed to turn to my partner and talk about? I don't know what that squirrel's doing. So if you go to the next slide, you can see what the beginning level text of this looks like. Same talk about it prompt, same essential question, same picture, but now we've made it more accessible for kids who are just learning English. They can look at this visual and say, okay, this is a squirrel. What can I say about this squirrel? There's sentence frames down at the bottom, which are probably a little hard for you to see, but this is where the teacher would say, what's the squirrel doing? And the student might say, eating. And you say, yes, the squirrel's eating. Now you say, the squirrel is eating. So there's a constant back and forth of speaking and listening and getting ready to, learn about whatever the essential question is. If you go to the next slide, this is the intermediate advanced book. So it's almost the same exact thing on this page, but the prompts at the bottom are just a little more complex and leave a little more of the speaking up to the student. It's not quite as scaffolded. So it's kind of approaching the regular classroom expectation. So if you go to the next slide, this is going to be vocabulary. So if you want to turn to your next pages in both of those books, we're going to be looking at the vocabulary for this text for this week is called The Fisherman and the Kaha Bird. It's a fable where we're learning a lesson from animals is the weekly topic this week. So if you go to the next slide, this is the vocabulary from the Classroom Wonders book. So this is what the kids would be seeing in their regular classroom. There's 8 vocabulary words, some good picture support, some good explanations of what these words mean, and an opportunity to talk about them. But this is a lot for a child who's acquiring English. These 8 new words are probably not words that they have any connection to. The vocabulary in Wonders is wonderful. It's very high level. It's very rigorous. but for a lot of our kids, it's over their heads. So what we really like is that at the beginning level, they, instead of having 8 words, if you go to the next slide, please, they pick out 2 words that are really key for understanding in this story. And they do a nice job of giving picture support, and then there's lots of opportunities to practice using that word right there on that page. There's a sentence that goes with the picture, there's a place to pick a word that means the same as, so you're talking about a synonym, making a connection, and then asking a personal question. Where do you need assistance? I need assistance when I buy my lunch. So you're giving the student an opportunity to talk about that word in a smaller group, repeating and repeating and repeating it. They're going to remember that word and use that word more often. In the beginning book, there's also a little section of grammar that goes with each story, something that's accessible to students at that level. In this case, it's using possessives. And on the next slide, in the intermediate advanced book, there's 4 vocabulary words plus 2 kind of more grade level vocabulary words that are in the grade level text. And then the grammar focus is using suffixes. So something that those students are more prepared to do. Excuse me. Go to the next slide, please. So now moving on to the next activity you'd be doing as a whole class in your 4th grade classroom is a shared read. So that would be the first reading of the story for the class. The teacher and the students would be reading it together. Maybe using the smartboard, maybe reading along in their books, but it's generally a whole group activity. So if you move to the next slide, this is the classroom book of the fisherman and the Kaha bird. So this is a 4th grade level text. It's very challenging. There's a lot of text on a page, a lot of those new vocabulary words. So the teacher, in reading this aloud with her whole 4th grade group, would be checking comprehension, as they're reading the story. But if you are an English language learner, you're sitting in your Reading Wonders class, a lot of this is going right over your head because this is too hard for you to read. Maybe you don't understand everything that everyone's talking about, and it's frustrating. So we really like how in the beginning level book, if you move to the next one, the story's the same, the illustrations are the same, but the text is a lot more manageable. It's the same story, but the readability is leveled so that our beginning English language learners can understand. And something that we thought was really great, down the left and right-hand sides, there is guided comprehension. So they're looking for evidence in the text. The teacher can bring their attention to different things. And then if you can see, it's very tiny. Number 1, talk about it, just to talk about what is the story even about. So I see a bird, I see a fisherman, the bird is flying. So you're guiding them with, what do I see, and then how do I talk about what I see? Because if we want the kids to be able to produce, the speech and the writing about these texts, we need to give them input that they understand, that they're able to comprehend. So if you go to the next slide, this is the intermediate advanced text. You can see it's a little more text on the page, it's a little more complex, it's approaching the grade level text. There's still the supports on the sides of the pages where the kids can take notes and talk about what's happening in the story in their smaller ESL class. So then when they go back to their big Reading Wonders class and they're talking about the story again tomorrow, they're familiar with it and they're more comfortable with it, and maybe they'll participate a little more than they would have just sitting in a big group not really knowing what was going on. If you go to the next slide, I think the next activity is comprehension. So at the end of every story, there are group discussion questions, activities to turn to your partner and talk about, find evidence in the text. So on the next slide is what that looks like in the regular classroom text. So it's requiring a lot of reading on the kids' part. I think the teachers would probably guide the kids through this, obviously, but it's assuming that kids can read and understand what they're supposed to be talking about. So there is a lot of focus on finding evidence in the text, going back and looking for those answers and proving that you know that you're correct. And then in the ELD book on the next page, we see the same skill of finding evidence in the text, but it's a lot more manageable for kids who have limited English. So the question is, what did you learn? What did you learn about the fisherman? So it gives them a sentence starter. I read that the fisherman blah, blah, blah. And I found that on page 7. So they're making them go back in the text and find it, and they're giving them a frame for being able to answer that question, which really makes them feel more successful than just expecting them to come up with something on their own. They may not be ready to do that. On the next slide is the intermediate advanced text, where you see the same kinds of questions with a little less support. The kids are responsible for coming up with a little more on their own, and it's approaching more of what the grade level text is asking the kids to do. On the next slide, we are going to look at the readers to writers section of the book. Again, this would not happen all in one day. The Wonders program is set up so that there's a 6-day week, and the teachers do different things on different days, and then we would be able to access and stay on the daily topic with the regular classroom teachers. So if you go to the next slide, the reading writing workshop in the regular classroom for this story looks like this. They're looking at the story of the fisherman and the Kaha bird, and they're talking about what's a strong opening, why is the story, what parts of the story show you that there's a strong opening, what's grabbing your attention. We're looking at editing, another story that's about, learning a lesson from an animal. And then there's something for the kids to work on. Identify the details of the strong opening, find some proper nouns, maybe that's the grammar focus of this week, and then tell how the student's revisions improved her writing. So a lot of reading and talking about becoming a writer in this activity. For the same activity in the Beginning Wonders book, on the next slide, the Beginning English Language Learning book, they set it up so that they have a model student who's taken notes on the story, and then he uses his notes from the story to write a letter to the fisherman from the Kaha bird, telling why the Kaha bird's never going to help him again, because the fisherman has done him wrong. So instead of the editing and the work being done for the kids, in the ELD book, the teacher and the students would do this together. They would look through the letter and find these, certain skills and certain things that they're focusing on this week. And then the Your Turn, the little green section there, it's asking the kids now to write their own letter. So we really like this because it's the sense of I'm modeling it, and then we do it together, and now you can do it by yourself. That's really a great way to work with English language learners, and we felt like this program did a nice job with that. So on the next slide is the intermediate advanced, which is a very similar activity, just with a little higher readability level, and asking the kids to produce a little bit more on their own. So I think that is all, looking through those books. There may be one more slide. Oh, that's it. Thank you for supporting us and having us out to show you these. We're really excited about this, and we really hope that it can become a reality for us in our ELL. So thank you for your time. Are there any other questions?
This is something that we're proposing to bring to the board for action in the next few months.
We are.
Timeframe.
We are, Mrs. Seminelli. Right now, we wanted to give the board sufficient information about the program and the connection with Reading Wonders. The ESL teachers are looking to see the enrollment, where children are, beginner or more intermediate learners, and what resources they might need. Then, so they're going to get me that information. I need to talk with the vendor, who is Nancy Quinlan from McGraw-Hill, to get a quote for the resources that we need. And then I expect, depending on the timeliness of my getting information from ESL teachers, either March or April, bring that to the board for a request for approval.
And then there would be time for them to do some professional development or whatever they might need to get ready to the resources into the classroom.
Yes, what we're hoping is if we can get approval no later than April, we'll have resources delivered before teachers leave for the summer. Hopefully, I haven't talked with Nancy Quinlan about professional development, but we were hoping to get something in before the summer, and then also our August professional development day as a beginner, and then throughout the year as needed by the teachers.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Oh, sorry.
I do. What's the expectation on assessment, and are there any assessment materials that come with it?
That's a great question. I forgot to mention that, actually. I'm glad you said that. I didn't bring it with me because there's just so many books to put on your table, but there is an assessment book that comes with each grade level kit. Unlike the classroom reading wonders, it's not a weekly assessment, it's a unit assessment. So that was the one thing that we felt was a little bit different. Everything else we felt meshed really well. So the kids, I guess, would still continue to take that weekly assessment in their regular classroom, and then we would use all that unit assessment. I guess we would determine how that would be used as far as grading would go. But we really think that if the kids are being exposed to the wonders for ELLs, they're going to feel so much more confident taking those wonders assessments, which have been a struggle for a lot of us this year. So thank you. Yes, there are assessments.
And Audrey, thank you for that, because as the board may or may not know, assessment of our ELLs has been a struggle this year with the Reading Wonders program. The teachers have been doing all that they can do to make accommodations, modifications, but we need to take a look at the Reading Wonders assessments, at the ELD assessments, and see what is more appropriate so that we have a plan for assessment that aligns with our instruction.
Thank you.
One of the challenges is that the ESL teachers only see our children for 30 minutes a day. So that poses a challenge to be able to teach as well as we might hope. So we'll work through those. Mrs. Graham.
So that 30 minutes a day that you see them, you're going to spend exclusively on Reading Wonders?
Well, depending on the student, when we talk about a newcomer student, and I think last time we were here, Anne Marie and Dr. McNeil spoke about, there is a newcomer kit component to this that will help a student who comes who is a non-English speaker, learn to survive at school and do all of those things. So I think that for most of our ESL students, this is what we would be using to support them in the classroom.
And when you see students, do you get all the third graders at once and all the fourth graders, or do you get all the non-speakers at all and at different levels? How is it breakdown for you?
It varies by school because our populations are so different. Most teachers see a grade level at a time. However many students in that grade level are getting ESL instruction come at once. But then depending on, learning support schedules, kids who receive extra services, being in 2 buildings in one day makes that tricky. So there are some situations where that's not possible. Or if you have a student who's a non-English speaker and a student who's ready to exit, even though they're in the same grade, sometimes it's not in their best interest to see them together. But for the most part, we see grade levels at a time.
And you think this program then is doable, where you can teach the whole class, kind of, even if they're at slightly different levels of English learning?
That's what we liked about this, because there's that beginning text and then the intermediate advanced text, and they're still doing the same story and the same essential questions, the same skills. So even if you do have children who are, different in terms of their proficiency, they can still come together and work on the same lesson.
Okay. Are you piloting this right now in any classes?
We have several sets of samples at several grade levels. I personally am using it with my kindergarten students a bit. We're in the middle of our annual testing right now, so it's kind of taken a hiatus, but I really like it at the kindergarten level. We have a lot of 4th grade sets from our reps, so that's why you had those here today. I think some of the teachers are using those. Anne-Marie, are you using it at any grade level yet?
A little bit with the kindergarten.
Yeah, I've used kindergarten, and I have a couple 2nd grade books too that somehow I ended up with that I've used with one of my 2nd graders. So I think it's been pretty well received by those of us who have given it a try so far.
Yeah, that would be good information, I think, for us to know too, if it's working, if you're actually using it, and it's as good as it seems, thank you.
We'll certainly get that information, Mrs. Green.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Prokop. So if Mrs. Travis and Mr. Tucker don't mind, we had a late entry to the program information this month that I don't think we would have wanted to turn away. It seems that we have Project Lead the Way engineering students from West High School who would like to show us an invention that they created that was submitted to the governor's STEM competition. Mr. Spears, do you have some late-breaking news about that
Yes,
competition?
we're in discussion right now for tied first place. So, guys, if you want to start getting set up, if I could introduce them. These, despite some of them having me as a teacher in both middle school and high school, they stuck with engineering.
I've never seen you in a white shirt and tie.
Oh, yeah, that's very rare. However, as we saw last year with the aqua tweeter, the early warning system that developed actually for downtown, the students here faced the same challenge to design and develop a technology that would meet the needs of the local community and Pennsylvania in general. And I thought it would be a great opportunity for them to share their work with you. It seems directly relevant. If you live in the community or drive in the community, as we all do, you'll immediately see the benefit as they go through the presentation. Also, I'd like that they stand as an example, really, of the path that I'd like all engineering students to be able to reach from middle school on, where they're able to take the skills that they developed in engineering and really then work independently to research, develop, test, and evaluate a solution to that problem. And actually, ideally bring it to fruition. So last year with the aqua tweeter, we are developing actually a working prototype now that microprocessors have gotten even smaller and more affordable with the Raspberry Pi Zero. The students are using that also as their graduation project, and so we will see that in development by the end of the academic year. And we certainly hope to see the same for their development. We need to switch over to the LC, the other court. Another thing, C1. Guys, you should have your line activated now. Yes, you do.
Hello everyone, we are the Downtown West STEM competition team. I'm Andrew Loomis. This is Andrew McEntee, Benjamin Codd, John Mitchell Patterson, and Kevin Codd. Today I'm here to talk to you about blind turn intersections. Blind turn intersections are intersections where a major road intersects a minor road at a stop sign. It's dangerous because visibility is impaired to either side, so it prevents a serious obstacle for drivers on the road. You've all dealt with them before. For the purpose of our product, we modeled an intersection, the intersection of Dallin Forge Road and Rock Raymond Road in Downingtown. We all drive on frequently, and it's a very difficult intersection. Just last week, I was driving over to Andrew's house to work on the project, and as I was inching out of the turn, I'm looking both ways, inching out, just trying to get around the corner, you know, and start turning because I'm good. Another car whizzes by me, last minute. It happens all the time. It's a dangerous intersection, and serious harm can happen to those who get in crashes. Unfortunately, 1,100 people died last year in Pennsylvania because of vehicle fatalities. And an estimated 2/3 of those fatalities are due to poorly designed intersections, which include blind turns. That's about 700 people in Pennsylvania last year who died because of poorly designed intersections. This was a crash last winter at the intersection of Rock Raymond Road and Dallin Forge Road. A school bus got in a car accident with a sedan, and the sedan ran into a tree. This is the worst case scenario, and this is what we tried to avoid by developing a solution to this need.
So when we were designing a solution, we decided we wanted to create a system that would warn drivers turning through the blind turn intersection of oncoming traffic before they could see it. And at first glance, an obvious solution to this problem might be just a four-way stop or a traffic light, but oftentimes these minor roads that intersect major roads where blind turns occur have low volumes of traffic, so putting something as extreme as a traffic light there might not be practical, both for cost reasons and just the reason that oftentimes blind turns occur on winding roads where there are many blind turn intersections, and installing many sets of traffic lights to account for all of these would be very costly and just impractical because it would slow down traffic to a point of inefficiency. So we wanted to design a solution that would both keep drivers safe and keep traffic flowing efficiently. And this system would involve a device that would detect oncoming traffic before drivers could see it, and also a sign to warn those drivers turning through the intersection.
So with the idea of the problem in mind, we set about figuring out how to solve this problem. How could we detect a vehicle before it comes to the blind turn, and then use that detection to send a warning to drivers waiting to turn around the intersection? Our first idea was to use a mechanical system, a sort of pressure plate in a road where the vehicle would drive over the pressure plate, depress the plate, make an electrical contact, and then that would send a signal to the warning sign to alert drivers. We made it fairly far into this system, which we drew inspiration from this system from treadles, which are used for toll auditing and toll booths on highways, and it's exactly as I just described, a mechanical plate in the road to detect moving traffic. And using this idea, we made it fairly far into the development of a solution. We wrote some code on a Raspberry Pi, which is a simple microprocessor, just like a computer, except scaled down and less expensive. And we were able to take inputs from multiple treadles inlaid in the road and use the data from those inputs to detect the speed, direction, and the time of passage of a car traveling down the road so that we could extrapolate from this data how long and when to turn on a warning sign. We thought this was a promising solution at first, but started to run into several problems. First, the code became very complicated and cumbersome, and really less of an elegant solution than we were hoping to pursue for this problem. Also, we ran into an issue with processor threading because the Raspberry Pi Zero that we were using has a single core processor, and in order to detect multiple vehicles at once, we would have needed a multiple core processor. It's important to have this because if a second car were to come into the intersection before the first car were to exit it, you wouldn't be able to detect that vehicle with a single core processor in the manner that we were using it. So it's really dangerous if a system can't detect every vehicle that's coming around a turn and not alerting waiting drivers to that unknown danger. Another simple issue with a mechanical system is just the issue of mechanical wear over time. Weather changes and just wear on the system can deplete its effectiveness and reduce its reliability. So we decided to seek out other possible solutions to our problem. We looked at laser range finding systems, and we looked at sonar systems as a means of detecting a vehicle with a sort of signal sent out, reflected off the vehicle, and received. But again, issues abounded. Interference in the air and anything that passed through the frame of reference of the detection system would cause a reduction in the reliability of the system and allow us to not necessarily detect every vehicle. We also considered the infrared video analysis software that's being used in new stoplights now that detects when a vehicle stops through video analysis. However, this was not the ideal solution because while it's really well designed for vehicles that are stopped, it doesn't work so well when vehicles are traveling at 40 or 50 miles an hour down a road towards a turn. So, not really understanding what to do, we decided to consult someone in the STEM community in our local area, Eric Canfield.
Eric Canfield is an entrepreneur. He is the author of 24 U.S. patents, and he has over 30 years of business experience. He's the president and co-founder of Ent Solutions. It's a product development company mainly dealing with electronics. And there's a division of Ent Solutions called Priority Green, Eric made. It deals specifically with the regulation of emergency traffic, such as police cars and ambulances. If they need to get somewhere in a hurry and a light is red, they can turn the light green so they can get there and save lives. He has a lot of experience in the industry and is perfect for our consulting on this project. He basically just told us about all the legal ramifications in addition to all the factors we need to take into account when designing the circuit.
So with that in mind, we came to our final solution. We decided to use induction loop technology. It's a very simple, reliable, and cheap solution that's already in use in traffic situations across the country. It's the same technology that's placed in the road so that traffic lights can gain an understanding of how many vehicles are at an intersection and change the lights accordingly. Basically, we have a model here, a scale model of our system at an intersection. We have a car modeled by this piece of 2x4 with pieces of steel on the bottom to represent the engine block or whatever is made of steel in the car. Then we have the road with an induction loop set in the road exactly the same way it would be in an actual road situation. Basically, the car rolls over and disrupts a magnetic force emitted by the induction loop, which triggers a signal to a processor and turns on the lights.
That's a very simple explanation of how this works. It was a long process to get there. As you can hear from Ben, there's a lot of research that went into the sensor technology and just prototyping in general. We did a lot of math for the resistor values to make sure everything wouldn't explode when we hooked it up. Here's just one progress video, or progress picture. We originally prototyped on a breadboard, but that's not a very permanent solution, so we moved to a perf board. This is partial progress right here. Here's just final assembly. You can see we're just putting on the induction loop and the final touches on it. And here's the finished circuit up close, and it's kind of hard to understand from this view, so we drew up a circuit schematic on LT Spice, which is a simulation. It uses very, very common components. They're very reliable. Just resistors, capacitors, transistors, and 3 very common reliable ICs. It uses 2 NE555 A-stable multivibrators and an LM324 quad op amp. They're very reliable, very common, and very cheap. For the sake of explanation, the only thing we really care about for the NE555s you see up there is the output, which is a square wave. All square wave is on or off. It's voltage or no voltage. We use this in 2 ways. One, for example, is the sign. When the voltage is high or on, it turns the right light on, and when voltage is low or off, it turns the left light on. Another thing we use this for is regulating the induction loop, which I'll get to in a minute. So we just add those out as square wave generators. That's all they really are. And in the bottom left, you can see an audio interpretation circuit. All this does is allow us to interface with a simulation we've made, and it interprets an audio file the same as it would an induction loop. So when the audio file is played, it basically says the car has gone over the loop. So we just add that out for now. And on the right side, you see a few components. They're very simple. They're just power regulation for the lights. And now we're left with the core of the entire circuit. This is the logic of everything. So if you see on the left side, there's a capacitor labeled C3 and an inductor labeled L1. All the inductors is a coil of wire, exactly what you'd find in the room. Now the L1 and C3 capacitor and inductor in parallel, that makes up an RLC resonant frequency circuit. This creates an oscillating magnetic field over the coil. And the square wave generator is making a square wave about a frequency of 40 kilohertz. The oscillation of the magnetic field over the inductor and capacitor is exactly 40 kilohertz as well. When they match perfectly, the output voltage on the circuit is a high voltage, about 2 volts in our case. Now, we have air core inductors in the ground, and when you pass a ferrous object over it, such as the steel in a car, the inductance of the inductor increases significantly, therefore the oscillation of the magnetic field decreases. That makes a mismatch in the square wave frequency and the inductor's frequency, and the output voltage of that circuit drops. We measure this drop with an LM324. It's just a voltage comparator. There's 2 pins on the voltage comparator, and all it does is when one pin falls below the other one, it just outputs high on the other output pin of the LM324. This goes to something called a diode peak detector, and all this does is charges a capacitor and slowly drains it through a resistor. We can change the resistance so we can allow the lights to stay on for a longer or shorter time depending on what intersection we're at. It is a very adjustable circuit, and it just goes straight to the lights after that.
So now that we're through all that complexity, we can get to the actual application of this. How can we bring the system to the roads of Pennsylvania? It's not that hard. An induction loop, to install one in the road, is a pretty common procedure. You just make saw cuts in a chamfered rectangle pattern as shown up there, inlay the coils of wire, and then hold it in with epoxy. It only takes a few hours to do, a few men to do, and you only have to close 1/2 of a road, so you're not unnecessarily inconveniencing drivers by closing the entire roadway to install this system. The circuit that we use is, aside from a few modifications for temperature control and weatherproofing, exactly as it would need to be to bring this system into a real application. So to scale that up wouldn't be very difficult either. With regard to our sign, this is a full-scale representation of the sign that you'd need to bring this into the real roads. So this sign can be obtained for only $100 or a little bit more than that, so installation of that really isn't much of an encumbrance either. This whole system, with all of its benefits to the safety and peace of mind of Pennsylvanians, can only cost a few $1,000s to install in its entirety, which is much less than the cost of a traffic light system, which might cost $100,000 or more. So clearly there's both a safety benefit and a monetary benefit to the installation of this system.
So we wanted to test the viability of our system, but at this phase in development, for both practicality and legality reasons, we weren't going to be able to put it on a real road. So instead, we decided to create a real-time simulation using Unity game development software to simulate the actual conditions of the real intersection between Rock Raymond Road and Dowland Forge Road.
To gather accurate information, we went to the intersection between Rock Raymond and Dowland Forge, and we stood behind the guardrail along the road and clocked the speed of cars as they drove along the curve. I'm sure we looked perfectly safe.
Only a few people stopped to see what was going on.
3.
We used the speed and distance data that we gathered, and we compiled that into the program to create a completely to-scale, real-time model of the intersection. And it was very important that we get the most accurate data possible to ensure that we were testing the system's viability as accurately as possible. And here's the simulation that you're about to see.
It's just testing right now.
When you turn on the power, it tests that it's working by blinking a few times.
So, first we have an intersection without our safety technology implemented. This is the exact intersection of Rock Raymond and Dowland Forge as we modeled. You come to a full stop at the intersection, look left and it's clear, look right and it's clear. So you begin turning, and unbeknownst to you, a car came around the intersection and T-bones you. This is a simulation, it's a live simulation, so occasionally extreme cases happen, like a hit and run.
What we're proposing to do is to put an induction loop a certain distance before the turn represented by this white box to detect oncoming vehicles.
So essentially, the oncoming vehicle will enter your frame of reference and will drive over the white box, the induction loop that will be set into the roadbed. It trips the circuit, and it turns on the sign until the car is in front of the intersection where the driver is waiting to turn.
Now, as for the placement of the sign, we want to put it to the right so people can understand that the traffic is coming from the right, but we do not want to put it too far to the right that the headlights would not illuminate it during the night. So right now you can't see it, but the light may start blinking in a second, and you don't see a car yet. Light starts blinking, then a car goes by. You would have never known unless the lights went on.
So now that you see that it works with one car, you might wonder, does it work with multiple cars? As I discussed before, how important it is that the system be able to detect multiple cars that come through the intersection. And it does take this into account. If you have a line of cars coming through the intersection, the system will detect the first car, turn on the sign accordingly to warn drivers of that first car coming, and then remain on as the rest of the cars in that line of traffic come through the intersection until the final vehicle has come into view and drivers can safely assess the turn. So you see the lights come on, a first car comes into view, and then they remain on until the second car has come into the intersection.
We apologize for the cutoff frame. The resolution does not match entirely. Normally you could see all the way to the end of the turn.
Our device obviously would have a profound impact on the safety of driving in Pennsylvania. Not only would it reduce the risk of crashing at a blind turn intersection such as this, but it would provide drivers with a great deal of security and peace of mind. Think of an older person whose reaction time is slower, or somebody driving on icy roads in inclement weather. They're driving extremely cautiously and slowly, and this device would make them feel safer and give them peace of mind and inform them that they're making a safe decision as they turn onto the major road.
And our device is very portable and modular. It can be installed at almost any intersection across the state or the nation for that matter. All that needs to be done is a simple traffic study. It won't cost very much to install, and it's very portable and very modular.
So while engineering is a study of technology, research, and construction of a new device, it's also a study of continuous improvement. We have a working model here, but we want to continue thinking about how we can make this better. So now we're going to discuss a few improvements that we might make to this device in the future.
So in the future, there are several key developments that we would like to make, one of which would be incorporating solar power.
So when we were first testing the circuit, we realized the current pulled by the circuit when it's waiting in standby mode, waiting to detect a vehicle, is only 40 milliamps, which is a very small amount of current, easily could be handled by a solar panel. Right now we have incandescent bulbs on the sign, and it draws a little more current than a solar panel might be able to handle. But if we convert to LEDs, the whole thing could be powered by solar. The benefits of this are pretty obvious. One, renewable energy is a big stride in today. Also, this could isolate it from the grid entirely, allowing us to install it in rural areas that may not have mains electric nearby, thus lowering the cost of installation.
Another solution we can make would be incorporating different sensor technology. Right now we're using induction loops, and this is the perfect solution for our system. It works perfectly and there are no flaws. However, if a new technology were to be developed that would work better than the one we're currently utilizing. Our system is so modular that our processor can be hooked to virtually any sensor system and it would still work perfectly.
One final advancement we could make is using a PCB. As you can see by the circuit picture, it's a pretty messy circuit. It's on perf board, which is mostly used for prototyping. A PCB is most likely what you'd find in consumer electronics, the green board with surface mount electronics. They're easier to manufacture, they're quicker, and they would just be generally more reliable and, quite honestly, more attractive.
So, in conclusion, blind turn intersections. We've all dealt with them. Some of us may deal with them every day, and they pose a serious danger to Pennsylvanians. Pennsylvanians are dying because of poorly designed intersections, and we think that our solution meets a genuine need, and we think that it can cut down the number of vehicle fatalities in the state of Pennsylvania. We think that it can increase the life expectancy for the average Pennsylvanian. We think it can improve the quality of life for Pennsylvanians. Thank you.
So what you're telling me is that we have to move the sign in front of the STEM Academy down a block or two. Is that what you're telling me? If we'd like. So, guys, congratulations. What a wonderful presentation. I thought I was at the Shark Tank. And you guys just knocked that out of the park. So you're saying, and I talked to Mr. Barker, so there was a tie. Is that what, or we're...
Currently, officially, there was a Conestoga that got first. We got second, but it was off by 1 point. There was an extra egg toss activity. Okay. Turns out that the scoring rubric that the judges used wasn't what was published to us. And when we became aware of that and notified them, they realized, they confirmed that. And so the issue is the second phase has additional funds that come from the development. And so since only that the funds were limited, one funding group per county, it would be unfair to draw that back from Conestoga. And so they're trying to resolve either to split it or...
So this is the second year of this competition, this governor's competition. So the next step is the state level.
That's correct. There's additional funding. They're able to refine the design, for example, utilizing LED lights rather than incandescent lights. The funds would be utilized for that. They'll refine the presentation and then repeat.
But so you don't know if you're going to the state competition yet?
Has not been confirmed. CCIU is supporting it, and the state representatives confirm it, but what they have to resolve is then funding, whether that occurs.
Who's the state representative? Cavalier?
I don't know who it is through the IU, so we'll find out supposedly by the end of the day today, possibly tomorrow. That's when it will be confirmed.
Guys, fantastic job.
Thank you.
Who would know it's a basketball school and a STEM school? You kicked it out of the park on this one, man. That's great. Good job.
Student athletes, Dr.
Yeah. Tonight's the game, and this was the game right here.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes BCC for this month, and thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you, man. Really good job. Excellent. Great. Good luck. Oh, yeah. Good. Oh, yeah.
Take it next to this, just like on the bus. Hey, pretty bad.
Yeah, like it's glowing. The picture.
Yeah, we picked good money for that.
See if I got it going now, yeah.
Without time.
But it does.
Oh my god.
Because it is slowing down the I don't know, for me, it's slowing down my camera. Whatever. Yeah, take it down. Thank you.
Thanks for coming out. Hopefully not failing the other
Whatever you say. Doesn't bother me.
I'm glad you could.